I'm so excited to have the wonderful, talented, brilliant Kristin Shoop on board with us here today to dive into her favorite session board features. Kristin, welcome. Welcome back. Excited to
Oh
have
my
you.
gosh. Oh my gosh, Brian, I'm so excited to be here. I am a super fan of Sessionboard because it has literally changed my process and my life. And I'm delighted to share that today. So thank you for having me.
I love it. Well, thanks for giving your time here. And I think, before we kick off, can you just let us know maybe two things? One, I think we owe you a congratulations because you're in the
Mm.
midst of an exciting career transition. So let us know a little bit about where you are, right? Where you've been. And I know you can't share yet where you're going, but just give us a little background on where you're at
Mm.
professionally. And then I'd love to just dive in and start on paint us a picture on what your life looked like before session board. What were some of the, I think,
Pre-session
like
board.
the key pain points, challenges that you were navigating?
Was there a life before session boards? That's the question. No,
Was it
there
a
was not.
dream?
That's right. Well, thank you. Yes, I have been in event planning, event management, meetings, working with speakers, content most of my 25-year plus career. So this is really meaningful to me to be with all of you here today. And I actually just came from a meeting planner organization quarterly meeting this morning, and we talked about speaker management. So it is just a critical part of anyone's process who does it, whether they're a meeting planner like myself, or if they're responsible in their organization for bringing speakers on board and getting them ready to present. It is all is scalable no matter what your level of involvement is. So it's very, you can tell I'm very passionate about it. And most recently, and very gratefully, I was with an amazing organization, ACES, which is the Society for Editing. And I just had the most amazing opportunity to take their process, which worked. And I'll describe that in a minute because that was my pre session board life, really understand it and understand what our goals and our objectives were. And then found session board, and it was just a really wonderful experience bringing them through it and then finding new ways to use session board, which I know we're going to touch on, Brian, to even continue the efficiencies of our operation and scale it into other pieces of of the organization's objectives. Pre-session board, I'm sure many of you can relate to this, and it works, which is the thing. I was a Google Docs girl, right? And it works because it's data, it's shareable, and it's immediately updated. So basically, a speaker would do a session submittal and we would put it in a Google Docs, and the whole team would manage it from there, including people that would help us evaluate the sessions and actually select them. But everything was in a Google Docs environment. And that worked for behind the scenes. But my big challenge and my big pain point was, but how do I scale the process with my speakers, right? So how do I scale emailing them and then contacting them? And how do I scale providing resources for them? So basically, they just got a lot of emails from me, like every way to Sunday, there's an email from Kristen
Yeah.
because that was my communication tool that I had, and I could deliver documents, I could deliver information, but I didn't have a centralized place where I could organize things and place things. And then on the speaker's own schedule at their convenience, they could tap into that centralized place, take out the resource they need, or maybe tap into the emails and see what the latest information was. We managed, and I'm sure it was workable. But once I found Session Board and I did the demo, I was like, holy smokes, look at this. This is a place where I can centralize not just my communications, which honestly was a huge efficiency upskill, but truly I could be a much more efficient and more effective shepherd to my speakers, because it's really important to really onboard your speaker in the most thoughtful and nurturing way, really, because what you want to do is have that connection with them throughout the planning process so that when it's time for the actual event, there's this incredible connection and they're just as passionate as you about the event and about their session and who's going to be in the audience and the content they're going to deliver and what it's going to look like and how it's going to feel. And that was really hard to accomplish as effectively in an email than having a centralized platform like Sessionboard. So that's my story.
I love it. And so I think the other really nice note here is that you're like the success of your event is starting from the very first touch point that you have with speakers through your call for content, your call for speakers. And
Absolutely.
like you're setting a higher expectation for an experience that hopefully sets your speakers up for more success when they step on stage. And that process
Mm,
starts from when you're recruiting speakers and solidifying your content. So
that's
I
true.
love this ethos that you have around what you're creating for a speaker experience, which I think in many ways it's one part actually like a marketing function for your event. It's also in another part, it's setting up a speaker for success from the moment they step on stage right from the get-go. I love your ethos for what you're doing and how you put speakers at the center of your work and your
They are.
mind share and your heart share. So let's actually, I'd love to spend our time actually going through
Mm,
your speaker and content management motion. So
yeah.
let's start with that core foundation, which is the call for sessions, call for papers, call for content. What I know we call it by many names. Walk us through how you're using Sessionboard to run an effective call for content.
Yeah. And again, session board is, I used it from this beginning where we're going to start now, the call for sessions, all the way to I look forward to seeing you at the event, to here's your session evaluations. Thank you so much for making our event so successful. So
Mm,
it is a first stop and last stop process, which again is a benefit because everything's efficient and speakers really understand session boards where I'm going to get my information. First step in the call for sessions, what I did in using session board is for anyone, you want to make sure you're being clear on what you're looking for from a speaker, right? So in order to align your event's objectives, your event's content, and getting those right speakers that can help you with that, you've really got to be transparent about what it is your event's objectives are. You've got to outline who's the audience, what are their expectations, as much as you can briefly include about your organization's culture and what you stand for and what you're about and what your mission is, because anyone that's going to speak for your organization that's outside of it, as a courtesy, really needs to understand for whom they're going to be speaking and working with and really helps them tailor their approach. So I always include all of those elements. High point, who's the organization? Second point, this is what the specific event's objectives are. Third, who's going to be in the audience, who potentially could be sitting in the seats in front of you, or if it's virtual, who's going to be online with you. And then once you set the stage for that, I also went through the process of, okay, so we're having these 5 different topic areas covered in this event. In those
mhm.
5 areas, there's also levels, right? Maybe there's introductory, there's intermediate, and there's advanced. So you really have to be very clear in your definition of what those topical areas are. And then again, to you, what is the introductory level? What does that mean? Who's that person? Describe it for them. Be really clear. What's an introductory level? What does that mean? What does that person look like that might be sitting in the chair? And so forth. And then once you've really covered all the things that go into the meeting, the fun part is asking them the questions. And I learned after a few times, it's not only asking for give me your bio, your headshot, your title, your organization, your affiliation. What is your session title you're proposing going to be? What is your session description that you're proposing? And those are all pretty basic contents. But what I found was most helpful was to also ask them, can you give me 3 bullet point learning objectives? And I was very
Mm,
clear that it was a bullet point because, as Brian is, when you know something and you're an expert, man, can you talk about it? You can go on, which is really great because it shows your passion and your depth of expertise, but it has to be digestible, right? And so when I asked for the 3 learning objectives, it really accomplished 2 things for me. One, it kept the speaker really honest in terms of what was in their actual description. Because if I read 3 learning objectives and I did not see that in the description, I'm thinking, okay, something's up. This is not aligning with what they just proposed. So I already have a few questions. And the
mhm.
second part is you're really having them not just focus on the content, but to whom they're speaking. Because you
Yeah.
have to have an objective. You have to know who your audience is. So I found that really helpful. And then the other thing that I could do, because Sessionboard allows you to put all your specific questions in, to say, what was the last thing you spoke at? Tell me who the audience was, how many, virtual, in person, your title, and what were your learning objectives. And again, just helps you understand where your speaker's coming from. But the reason I love being able to incorporate all those different questions in Sessionboard is because it comes back and it's so easy to organize and clearly see what you have. So I remember I mentioned those 5 topical areas. Well, what if halfway through the call for sessions, I'm watching what's coming in? What if 90% of them only covered one topic area? Well,
Mm.
well, that is super uncool. So, so it gives you an opportunity to proactively start marketing your event to speakers who would help you cover the other 4.
The other areas.
Yeah. So again, that was a really a silver lining application I found in Sessionboard was I could track so easily what kinds of proposals I was getting, which areas they were covering, and which levels they were covering. And if I was lacking in an area, I could be very proactive with plenty of time to spare and try to go out into the community and source those.
Awesome. So if I can speak this back and synthesize what you shared, you're you're streamlining a call for papers process where there's, for all the speakers, there's a single point of entry for submitting their proposed sessions.
Mhm.
And all of those proposed sessions are then going into a centralized space where you can start to get a sense of, oh, here's where my program's starting to flesh out. But
Yes.
beyond that, you're achieving a few things. One, you're using the submission process to, first and foremost, educate and align speakers to the
Mhm.
outcomes, the audience, the intentions of the event.
Yeah.
And you're also capturing data at the same time about your speakers that you can use to get a more holistic, high level view of what degree or level of advanced expertise do we have coming in through our proposals, what session topics are covered, et cetera. I'm curious, are there other data points that you find really helpful to try to collect through the call for papers?
Again, you have the ability to really customize what your call for sessions or call for papers looks like for your organization. And another thing that I found really helpful was if they wanted to share their LinkedIn profile. And we could also be very transparent with, hey, as part of our organization, we ask that you go through a DEIA process or whatever your organization may have is, hey, this is standard for us. We really like to align all of our processes using these things. You can ask your speakers that right out of the gate, first step.
At the get-go. Yep.
Yeah. So that they're clear. Oh, okay. If I get accepted and I agree to it, then these are the expectations. And it's not going to be a surprise when you later tell me, wait, what? I didn't know
Yes.
speakers had to do that.
Mm.
And I try to give very high level milestones and deadlines, but very high level, just so they have an idea. Oh, okay. She's not going to ask me for my complete presentation a week after I get accepted. Right. So I just try to establish some very basic milestones because I find that really helps speakers plan as well.
That's great. That's great. Okay, so you've run your call window is closed, and unless you leave it open 365, which is another option.
Yeah.
But let's say for the sake of the conversation, your call closes, you've collected a number of sessions and proposals, and we have to distill down who we're going to accept and who we're not going to accept. So let's move into how does that then transition you into a evaluation review process for selecting sessions? And I think the component after that to where we're going is how do you then build the agenda in the program? A two-part, but let's just start with selecting sessions through your review process.
Mhm.
So how do you run that in Sessionboard?
Absolutely. And I will just say the first step, because I really have to brag about this, because honestly, it's just brilliant. I use Sessionboard to send an email once call for sessions is closed, just to say thank you to everyone for submitting your session. And again, I'm reminding them, here's our deadlines for notifying you when you may find out your decision, were you accepted, or just so you understand what your timeline is. And I found that speakers really liked that an intermediary touch point so that they knew, yes, they did get my call for sessions confirmed. Yes, the evaluation process is starting, and I should look around this date to hear back from you. Because it can be an anxious process, right? When you're submitting something and you're waiting to hear. So when it's time for the evaluations, we have a session selection task force, or many of you might have a committee or you're on the committee for the session selection. So Sessionboard allows you to create an evaluation plan. And so everything's already in Sessionboard. I'm not creating spreadsheets. I'm not exporting data. It's all in Sessionboard. Everyone is assigned in Sessionboard as a session evaluator, and Sessionboard understands what sort of permissions that gives them. And then we had always done what's called just a blind evaluation. And so our first step was to do that because we're really interested in the content, because the main objective of the conference was educational, right? So the
Hmm.
content was truly the backbone of the
Content is king.
success. Yes.
Yep.
So when that's your objective, we just found that doing it blind gave us just great objective ability to run through the title, the description, the learning objectives, and really focus on how did those resonate with our audience and what was going to be the best options for those in each category at each level. So the evaluators would go in, and again, depending on how large your event is, you can also say, rather than just saying, okay, evaluators evaluate all the sessions, you can really assign them and say, you're going to take this topical area, or you're just going to take 12, any 12.
Hmm.
So I also found it very helpful because you can really make it not so overwhelming for your evaluators, because sometimes depending on the size of your event, it could be a lot. You can design rubrics in the evaluation plan so that, again, and you've communicated this with your speakers in your call for sessions already, but you make sure you establish what the rubric is so that what they're basing their decisions on for the selection continues to be in alignment with what the event's objectives are, with what the speakers have submitted, and what it is you're looking for. And I always did a numerical one. You can do stars and happy faces and all kinds of different things, but I'm a math nerd. So I always chose numbers because it really sometimes came down to this one got a 4.13 and this one got a 4.36. Okay, it was
Mm.
that close. I'm going to let the math decide, right? To be truly objective. And the 4.36 selected if they're all equal in all other ways. So I found that to be really helpful because, again, Sessionboard lets me sort that. And it was so easy to see that. The evaluators have a deadline as well. So they go in, they do the
Mm.
rubric, they're assigning their grades, so to speak, but also it's not just quantitative. They can give a qualitative aspect to it, and they can give me any just perspective or insights or comments about what they read and how they feel about it. And that was helpful because sometimes you might get a session that they're really similar and you're like, oh gosh, these are both awesome. And they're really similar. Like, how do I choose? And those comments can really be insightful. And I found that was another really good use for the comment section, was just helping those really tough decisions. Well, what did the comment say? I
Mm.
liked it because it was both quantitative and
And
qualitative.
qualitative.
And
Nice.
again, for me, everything was sortable. So when they were done with their evaluation process, then I could go back. I start my process of saying, okay, what were my top, just pick a number, whatever no, I don't have it. Depends how big your event is, but what are your top choices in terms of the limit? You have a limit of number of sessions you can offer, right? So whatever that number is, pick those. And then you got to go and sort through. Like for me, I always had to be conscious of what tracks are filled. Well, I can't offer 70% of my sessions in only one track. I have to honor all the tracks. And then I can't have only introductory level because your community has people with all different levels of experience, right? So you want to cater to that community's diversity. And Sessionboard, again, lets you see the data in a way that you can constantly shuffle, quantify, reorganize, and come up with things. And that was absolutely incredibly useful to me.
I have a couple follow-ups. One is to the review process. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm actually like pulling from a conversation I think we had like months ago. But
Yeah.
I believe that even after the anonymous review cycle, you also have, do you have other review cycles, like whether it's for panels, or don't you have a review cycle where you do show speaker
Yes.
details? Okay.
Yes. Thank you for reminding me.
Can you
Yes,
share
we
about
do.
that as well?
I'd be delighted to. So what I found was we did a blind review just to be objective about the content. But when a panel is speaking, truly the value of the panel is the value of your speakers in the panel, right? Because that's where all your content is pulling from. So for panels only, what I did is I allowed them to see basically all the speakers' bios, names, titles, affiliations, so that they did have access to that and they could then evaluate the panel on the value of the speakers and what
Mm,
and again aligning to the objectives the speakers were claiming to deliver.
awesome. So that's super helpful.
Yeah, it is different. Yeah.
Monica had a great question. She was asking, can you share the numerical scale on your rubric that you use for rating proposals? They
Mhm.
most recently used a 1 to 3 rating scale and found that it wasn't a big enough range. Is there like a sweet spot for the range of the scale that you prefer?
Super question. I am a big fan of 5. Yeah,
5.
I did 1 to 5. Yeah, because and again, a little bit of that was dependent on my rubric, right? Because it really goes into what points are you evaluating on. But 5 for me was wonderful because, like you said, to your point, 1 to 3, it's there's not much room. Everything has to be really awesome, mostly awesome, or not as awesome. And many times we were so fortunate. There were so many sessions submitted that were such great quality and they were really close. And having the numerical scale and a little bit bigger range was quite helpful because it did help differentiate them. Because remember, you're having a bunch of evaluators and they're giving numerical scores to the different parts of the rubric. So that math scale in the end is not just typically, it's not usually a clean 3 or a clean 4 or a clean 5. It's 4.16,
Yeah,
3.79. So it does become useful to have the 5.
that's great advice. And I do have a quick call for papers question. I'm curious because it does connect to the evaluation review stage as well. How Give me your best guesstimate, but like what percentage of sessions coming in are speakers self-selecting to speak at your event versus how many are you going out and strategically targeting? And then
Mm,
for those speakers that you want to target, like how does that factor into the evaluation phase? Like how are you, yeah, like how does that work with the anonymous evaluation that you use?
excellent. All speakers, no matter if I solicited you to, I think you'd be amazing at this conference. This is what we're looking for. I've seen you before. I think it'd be great. Or just again, remember, it's on the website. They just click and boom, they're a
They can
session
just
board
go.
and then they're going. So 24/7, it's open, which is fantastic. But everyone goes into the mix, so to speak, from the very beginning. So even the speakers that might have been solicited directly, when they're being evaluated they're being evaluated blind. Everyone,
Okay.
unless you're a panel, everyone is blind. There again, every organization really needs to cater to what works for them. There, there have been, and I've seen this across multiple industries and multiple organizations where maybe they save a tiny percentage, and by tiny, maybe 1 or 2 sessions for someone who's like a legacy presenter who has things that always resonate with their specific community and who they know that their community is going to really be interested in what this speaker has to say because they're interested all the time because they're such a big name. So in
Mm,
those cases, I would just have to eliminate one of my slots and say we had, again, I'll just make up numbers. Say you had 100 speaking slots and I'm saving 2 for legacy. That means my session selection task force has to help me pick 98 others. Right.
okay. Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. So your review process is complete. We've
Hmm.
run the call for papers. We've run the review process.
Yeah.
Now you are building and piecing together your agenda. So how are you then, again, all in one centralized place, then going into the agenda design and building out the program?
So my very favorite session board application is the magical. There's the calendar and all your sessions, and you literally slide your sessions and all these different colored tiles onto the calendar of your events. So say you have sessions Thursday from 9 to 4, Friday from 10 to 3, you can slide in all your sessions. And I always had concurrent sessions. So it was really important in my planning that I not just plan out the day, but for one time slot, I had to make sure I had a diverse amount, right? A diversity in my
Mhm.
sessions. So they couldn't all be introductory. They couldn't all be advanced. They couldn't all be one track. They really had to have a nice diversity and mix to them. And Session Board has this application where you're just sliding it onto a calendar. And because each track is a different color, it's visually the most easy way to piece together your agenda. Cause I can see, oh, well, like I have 4 greens. Like clearly that's not going to work. So then you can really put together your agenda. And I found that was an incredibly helpful tool. And then I double check myself, right? Because you can export it in a different way. And then you can look at it in a more sort of, I'll call it Excel-ish, right? Feature where you can see it just laid out in that way. However your brain works. I work very well with visuals. So the color tiles were just genius for me to do. And again, because the way Session Board works, I could also make little annotations. Like you have speakers and they're like, hey, I can literally do any session at all except Thursday at 1. Then I won't put you Thursday at 1. That's not that hard to work around, right? Because I have a lot of other time slots. So it really lets you honor, and cater to your speakers' needs as much as you can. And also obviously honor your program and make sure it's diverse and it's complete. And at any one day, any one of your attendees is going to end the day and say, wow, what an amazing collection of sessions. It was so hard
Mm.
to choose. I love hearing those words. It was so hard to choose.
The
Favorite
best
words.
feedback.
Yes. The best word. It wasn't it. They were all awesome.
So in the drag and drop agenda builder, like what happens if you accidentally like have a room, ballroom 1A? Like what if it's double booked? What happens, right?
Did
Like
that ever
you're
happen?
you- 100 times. I'm just curious, like in those instances, like as you're building the program, what
Mhm.
happens?
So visually, honestly, you'd see it straight away, which is the other thing, because when you're working in more of an Excel sort of database, human eye can overlook the same thing easily. You
Yeah.
just say, oh yeah, the same, and you don't necessarily see it. When you have the drag and drop, you're like, wait a minute, why do I have, for me, why do I have 6 rectangles in a 5 rectangle space?
Yep.
That doesn't work. Or again, color coding. Well, 3 orange and 3 green means 6. I only have 5. So what did I just do? You really can catch yourself, not just in planning the diversity and quality of it, but also like just, oh, wow, I just double booked a room.
Mhm.
So
That's great.
easy.
Yeah. Session Board also has a like a notification feature for those kind of conflicts. So it'll alert you
You
of
can.
conflicts in your
Yeah,
program. And it's, oh, you can't do this. Actually, we have to resolve this.
that's right. That's right. Unless you're all going
Beautiful.
to share. Yeah. No, it's got all kinds of the checks and balances systematically, which again, getting from my former life as a Google Docs, there were literally no checks and balances because Google Docs holds data. It's not quantifiable and it's not programmed for any sort of correction or process alignment. Whereas Session Board, it's built in the program. It protects you from the one-sided self as you're planning.
I also come from a world of building a program in Google Sheets. And I always remember the like event goes live in 2 days, like panic when we realize, oops, like we accidentally
Yeah.
scheduled a speaker at a time that they're not supposed to be in. Right. There's all these things that happen. And now all of a sudden we're like caught in this
Yeah.
manual panic where it's, oh my gosh, like we have to go now, like manually update the website and we have to rearrange
Oh, yeah.
X, Y, and Z. And it's just, so yeah, I have lived in that hot seat myself.
Oh, yes. I think that's again a key component of Session Board is it is really a tool that lets you think so just thoughtfully about your program. And again, just knowing myself, it protects me from myself because I get excited and I get, wow, this is going to be amazing. And that's when it says, well, Kristen, that's nice, but you've already booked this room or you've already have 17 of the same sessions. So, it's very helpful with year planning just because, again, it's as any program comes together, there's so many facets to that program and you're trying to honor each one of them. It really highlights when maybe you haven't in the way you intended.
Yeah. And I even think that connects back to your initial point around like you're designing for care amongst all of your speakers, right?
Yeah.
So this is also helping honor their preferences, their
Mhm.
timing, their
It
needs,
does. Yeah, it does.
which I think is great. Okay, so we've gone through call for papers, one, we've
Mhm.
gone through evaluation process and building your program. Let's actually go. I want to rotate back to the speaker side, and I'm just going to call this bucket because I think there's a few things we're going to talk about here. But I'm going to call this bucket setting up your speakers for success.
Okay.
So let's just start with smooth communication. How are you able to communicate with your speakers once evaluations are complete and you're building your program? I'll leave it to you.
Yes. Oh my gosh. So again, other favorite part is I have this email functionality in Sessionboard, and Sessionboard allows you to communicate in a session level and at the speaker level. And once you're in there, you can understand what the nuances and differences are, but you can build templates. And that's what I love, to be really consistent and constantly brand and build excitement for your event. We always had banners, right? And not just for the organization, but for that specific event. So I would always make my signature line with the banner. You can put your organization logo in there and you can make these templates, which was really helpful. So besides a template of, yes, you've been accepted, everyone's getting the exact same information. But I also personalize it because Sessionboard allows you to place tags into things. So, well, everyone's getting essentially the same content of, yes, you've been accepted. Thank you for joining us. Here's how it works, that, and lots of processes and deadlines. It's also very personal. Hey, Brian, we're so glad to have your session titled, How to Use Sessionboard. And here's what I have is your title and your session description. And it's everything that you wrote, it just extracts directly from it. And then please make sure you don't have any changes. And if so, I need them by X date. And then boom. So it's been personalized to recognize your session, your title, your bio, your thing, but also informing you about really important things you need to know for the event and what you need to do in order to be accepted. The other thing that I quickly designed was just a general template, because there's all kinds of communications you do after you've
Mhm.
accepted before the event starts, right? You're just constant. So I built a template that was just general news from Kristen, and it had my signature line and the beautiful banner for that specific event, logo for the organization, and just always the dear first name. So
Yep.
it would be personal. And then I could fill in anything I wanted in between the dear and the signature block. And I can't tell you how many times I was so happy to have that, because it's consistent, it's branded, they know who it's from. I can always change my subject line. So I'm very topic specific of, this is what I'm saying now. And that becomes very searchable for them later.
Yep.
So very streamlined.
Nice. Yeah. So you're bridging your prior life of tons and tons of one-to-one communications,
Yeah.
and now you're scaling that across
Yeah.
what we could call your speaker file.
And it's one button. You can select all 500 of your speakers, if that's how many you have, right? That's it. You've just
Yep.
communicated with everybody. But I can also click everyone and I can say, oh, but not Brian, because I actually just spoke with him and he mentioned he doesn't need to hear from me right now or for whatever reason. Or, oh, I know this is Brian's frontline person. And actually, this is really for the frontline person. I'm going to take Brian off but put his frontline person on. So even though it can be everybody, you can still customize. Oh, but not them. Oh, yes. And them instead. It,
Yeah. You can
it's,
target
yes,
admins or executive assistants that are supporting the
yes,
speaker and the logistics leading up to the
absolutely.
event.
Yes.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Hmm.
So I think another element of what I guess what we'll call setting speakers up for success is as soon as a speaker finishes
Hmm.
their call for paper submission, they get access to a speaker portal.
Yeah.
And so Kristen, I'd love to hear like the ways that you use the speaker portal to manage a full resource library for your speakers, and as well as like other use cases like holding speakers accountable to deadlines. And yeah, I would love for you to dive into the ways that you're creating a great speaker experience with the portal.
Absolutely. I am a huge fan of the portal and I just migrated over to using that. I think geez, Jasmine would set me straight, but I think it was just the most recent one. The difference is you have your portal, which everybody has access to when they submit a proposal, right? So everyone's in that portal. Once you get down to the line where you've now selected your speakers, well, that's a different pool, right? These are the people you're going to be working with and communicate with. So you take them out of there and put them in their own speaker portal. And then everything you're doing in that speaker portal is protected and only the speakers that are accepted have access to it and can see it. So it's a very safe space and it's a very focused space. And that was really lovely because I didn't have to worry about, ooh, did I just select everyone, even the people that weren't selected? And again, there's actually checks and balances, so you don't do that either. But I really loved using the speaker portal because I also could put all my assets for speakers directly in the speaker portal only. And I found that to be terribly useful. So my speaker assets go from everything you can imagine. I have PowerPoint templates if they want to use them, up to them, but I put all
Yep.
the templates in there. I always put a copy of the you've been accepted email because there is a lot of data in there. There's deadlines, there's how to's, there's this is what's next. And I know you got to get a lot of emails, right? So
Mhm.
not that they don't have the email, but gosh, it sure is just time consuming to have to go through and actually find that email. So I just put all of the basics of that. I put a copy of that in there. I put all the social media tiles in there. Hello, I'm speaking at.
Mhm.
We have a DEIA process. And so in order to equip them for that, our template for the slide deck was also accessible. So we put a how to use this particular guide because some people don't know the nuances when you're new to accessibility and incorporating all those things. So we had a how to guide, we had the template, and then we had a really amazing committee. They actually put together a super helpful grid of these are elements that would make your presentation accessible. And here's things to think about proactively if you want to make it accessible. And not only were they the things, but they were the things and the whys, and then click here for resources on. Very helpful. And that was a
Nice.
lot of data that was just so easy to just put in there in one document and we're done. We did an orientation that was virtual because, of course, can't get everyone together in a room, recorded it, put the recording in there, put the slide deck in there, put the chat transcript in there because people always share really helpful things in the chat. My goodness, we don't. I'm trying to think what else we put in there. I put everything in there. If I was like, oh, I can put that in the resources. Yeah, I honestly tried to take any deadline, data point, platform, how to use, like we use a platform for the actual conference, which for us was Huva. Well, you could even
Mhm.
put that, how to use that in there. Just anything a speaker would find helpful, anything, and put
Nice.
it in there.
Bonnie had asked, how do you handle speakers who miss deadlines, like turning in their presentations?
Honey, did they ever really miss?
A
Right.
speaker has never missed a
Come
deadline.
on. So interesting. That was actually a big part of the conversation this morning as well. Thank you, Bonnie. That is so part of the meeting planners universe, isn't it? We can all empathize with that. I would put things on my calendar to remind, okay, remember I said March 1st, it's February 15th, 2 weeks is coming, TikTok. And then again, you can see in Sessionboard who has turned in what. There's several different ways you can set it up. You can do by tasks or you can do by content. You can do it a couple different ways, but you can see it is the whole point. And you can literally scroll through all your sessions and just see visually, oh, it says, oh, nope. So I can target the, oh, nope, people and just select them only for an email. So I don't have to bother everybody else that already did it and say, hello. And again, it's personalized. They don't know how many people I'm emailing because it only goes to them. Reminder that the deadline was actually yesterday. and please submit that. And here's what you can use session board to your advantage for Bonnie is you can put a deadline on it for submission, right? So session board is quote unquote open, and that portal is open for them to upload their content or do their task till a certain date and time. When that date and time passes, session board is no longer accessible to them. Like they can get in the portal, but they can't actually access that task that they're now late on. So then they have to either email you and say, "Hey, Bonnie, really sorry, but it looks like I can't get access to session board." And then you have to open their portal for them. So there is that sense of, I always say, hey, if you miss the deadline, the portal will close and you will no longer have access to it. And you'll have to reach out to me personally. And nobody really wants to do that. They really prefer not to, but you can certainly be very flexible with your speakers. And I know I had a few of them on several events. And I would just say, you know what? No problem. I extended it to next Thursday at noon. Let me know if that works for you. Because, of course, you want to work with your speakers when you can. You just don't want 80% of them, right, to be late. So it's a constant email reminder cadence that you keep up before the deadline. And then after, usually I sent one email like, hey, you missed. I'm here and I'm ready. Just let me know what you need. And then finally, for those that just have extenuating circumstances, you can work with them.
Nice. That's great. That's
Yeah.
great. So we are quickly running short on time, but before we wrap, I want to get to the last area we wanted to cover, which is platform integrations. And so I'm curious, like, how are you using Sessionboard to bridge into other systems? Talk to us about open APIs and that last mile with sharing data and information across
Yeah.
more than one tool. Just give us a little insight into how you use it and what's been helpful.
Oh my gosh, so many things. So how many meeting planners out there just got shivers? And yes, oh my gosh, I remember when happened when you just said integration, because that can be a tough word sometimes. So we always had a platform that was not a direct API connection with Sessionboard. Just and that was again, just that's what the organization chose. It was great, it worked for us. But I have to tell you, so easy to get the data from Sessionboard into the platform without an API doing all the bridging for us. Everything exports at the drop of a hat and was very easy to get on to an Excel sheet and upload it into the next platform. I have to say, Brian, I do not remember a delay of any kind because
Mm,
it just the way that Sessionboard takes care of the data behind the scenes that as a user I never see. It's done well and it's clean. I guess that's a good word to use, right? Because it's just clean. Like it won't let you have a space that where there shouldn't be a space. So I can't give Sessionboard bad data, quote unquote, to get out bad data. So
mm.
good data goes in, good data comes out, and then it was really clean. And just anecdotally, I've talked with other Sessionboard users who have had that API ability to go into a platform that was connected to Sessionboard, and they also said, "Yep, you push a magic button, and everything goes to the other side."
Yeah.
Can I just riff on one thing and talk about documents and uploading? Because,
Oh my gosh,
um,
please.
yeah, just so not related to API, but just to make everyone just feel how cool this is. So there's a feature in Sessionboard, and again, you can do it through a file content lane, or you can do it through just uploading content directly in their session lane. But Sessionboard allows the speaker to essentially upload their presentation. And our organization had a process where all presentations were reviewed ahead of time. So we needed that ahead of time. And people had to upload it, right, in order to be reviewed. And I have to say that also was extraordinarily efficient and easy. And I could tell in a nanosecond which one I had, which were missing. It controls it to the point of when I say it's this size data limit on the file, it is. And
Mm,
I can tell them that proactively. And when they upload it and they've gone over, it will upload. And there's a message that says file too large. It controls the file type. So if you said, I need a PDF and they give you a PowerPoint, you've already told Sessionboard you're not going to accept a PowerPoint. So it really makes the content management process streamlined as well. But it's also really easy for your speakers. And you have the ability to be very proactive in shepherding the process of this file size, this file type. This is the deadline. So easy versus collecting hundreds of emails. Here's my presentation.
Yep.
It's 19 million gigawatts. So good luck.
Amazing. That's a great note. And I did want to also just add something onto the integrations conversation is we are actively and proactively trying to always make regular updates to the platform to make it as easy as possible for you to integrate.
Sure.
So just a great
Sure.
example that I have, this was literally released 2 hours ago. This is like hot off the press.
Whoa.
Just another great example is we just announced an integration with Ingo. So if
Super.
you have Ingo, you can now right within the Sessionboard platform, a speaker can share direct to their social channels and
Wow.
promote and help you get more exposure to your event with the click of a button.
Awesome.
Just like another
See?
easy way to
Here we
try
go.
to reduce barriers and frictions both for
Yes.
you and for your speakers. So and Andrew just linked some of the other integrations that we have.
Oh,
But
good. Andrew. Awesome.
Andrew's here.
Yeah, and I have to give a strong shout out, and this was not on our program officially, but a strong shout out to honestly anyone who's had to use a platform, technology, and you're collating so many different parts of data and speakers and onboarding. Session boards, help desk, and support system, and customer service success managers are exceptional and exceptional. I don't just mean helpful, exceptional. So down to the point where as soon as I told Jasmine that I'm a visual learner, every time I asked that poor woman a question, which was frequently in the beginning, because I'm a curious learner. So even though I can do it and I see it, I always wondered, well, why? How? She would record how she did something. Knowing I'm a visual learner, she knew that if I watched her do it, instantly get it, no
Amazing.
problem, and done. So again, just not only are they knowledgeable and helpful, but they really dial in to try to support you in the way that works best for you. And I thought that was rather magical.
Jasmine and Katrina are the real superheroes of Sessionboard on our customer success
awesome.
team
Yeah,
that are always available to help. So
right.
I think before we wrap, there was one question that Debbie sent me before the session that I want to make sure we squeeze in.
Mhm.
And that was if you can go back to when you were onboarding, do you have just any advice or lessons learned in the implementation process? Are there maybe the advice could be like, are there corners that you can see around that others can't because you've been through onboarding onto the platform? Just any general advice you have.
Oh, yes. Oh my gosh. Great question, Debbie. Thank you. So what I did again, and I've already said this, when I say visual, like I'm super visual. So what I did, knowing that I wanted to have every question a speaker might ask me, I wanted to be able to answer and be helpful to their process and also make sure I'm making a mission for my organization and delivering the content that I promised we would. I asked for we already had session board, but I asked Jasmine to do let's pretend I just submitted a session. And I had her just go through with me as if I were a speaker. And she let me, quote unquote, play in that sandbox with my organization already built and in there. And that for me was a really great tool to have. It just built my confidence up like that. I already knew a lot about session board. I knew it's going to work. I'd done all the other normal onboarding things, but that I really wanted to see it as a speaker.
Nice.
And she really helped me do that. Debbie, I would just say always be mindful of what your top objectives are and the high notes of what you want to do for your speaker community and your content quality management process. And then get familiar and ask questions because Session Board is constantly coming up with new ways to curate data, to hold data, to use data, to make it accessible. And there's every time I have an event, Jasmine's always, well, did you know we did this now? And I was like, what? Ask questions because there's probably a way that you can use Session Board to execute to exactly your speaker and your content need and play in the sandbox. Get in there, pretend you're a speaker, see what the experience is, and make sure you're executing and delivering what you thought.
Yeah. And I'll also provide feedback, right? Like
Yep. Mhm.
we're very honest about the fact that we are building in the open, and your feedback is what helps make us better and helps us serve you better. Feedback is warmly
Yeah,
welcomed, and
it's very true.
yeah.
I
So
may have done that a few times.
and it was helpful. It was helpful for us. It was helpful, and ultimately it helped us
She's
help you,
asking
right?
questions again.
Amazing. Well, we have 1 minute left. I do want to let everyone know, and I want to give you a final word, Kristen, but I want to let everyone know that if you're interested in bringing forth some of the challenges that you have in talking one-on-one with someone on our team, we would love to actually pull back the curtain and show you everything that Kristen talked about today. If you'd like to get in touch with us, this is a contact us form if you'd like to get a demo of the platform. And again, this will be tailored to your specific needs and where you're looking to better streamline your speaker and content management. But Kristen, as we wrap, and thank you everyone for attending, do you have
Thank you.
do you have a parting word or a final thought before we part?
Just thank you, Session Board, for giving me a whole new life as a meeting planner. And I really feel the key to success to deliver for my organization and make sure I'm hitting all the high marks with them, and also just be a really great shepherd for my speakers, because your speakers and your content, whatever your program is, those are the critical mass. And I saved zillions of hours. And honestly, it was way more fun to use Session Board with all the different bells and whistles. Have fun. Why shouldn't doing something great be fun at the same time? Session Board gave me the tools, and I'm really grateful that I was able to do that.
I love it. Well, thanks, Kristen. Thanks so much for joining us. Congratulations on all the success, and thanks for sharing your time and wisdom with us today.
Oh, it was awesome. Thank you, everyone, for coming.
Thanks, y'all. Till next time.